What's happening, guys? It's your boy Lukey here from Grit to Grid, and I've got a very special announcement to make. A couple of months ago, I had the absolute pleasure and honor to sit down and have a chat with former Formula One driver Vitantonio Liuzzi.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Vitantonio Liuzzi. I drive for the Red Bull Racing Team in Formula One.
We went through some amazing things through his whole Formula One career. He had some fantastic and funny stories, and there was plenty of stuff we got through. So sit back and enjoy, and get ready to hear about Tonio Liuzzi and everything Formula One. See you guys. Enjoy. Welcome everyone to Grid with our very first guest, Tonio Liuzzi. Tonio, thank you for joining us. How are you, mate?
All good, thank you. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you guys. Happy to be here.
Thank you, mate. You're a legend. You're a legend. So, Tonio, we've got a lot to get through, mate. We've got a short period of time, so we'll get straight into it. But you've had a very colourful Formula One career. I've been following you way back in 2005, I believe, when you made your debut. But I want to know a little bit about the upbringing of your life, first of all, growing up as a kid, and essentially what got you into car racing. What made you get into it, or was it something through family or a passion?
It was basically a coincidence because when I was going to school, I was playing soccer since I was a kid, and nothing related or linked to motorsport. But a friend of mine in my class, he told me that he was a really good go-kart driver, and he wanted to show us how good he was. And one day, basically, he brought all us, the class, he brought us to a go-kart track. And I tried there for the first time a go-kart, and I fell in love straight away. And luckily, my father followed my request. He saw that my eyes were blinking, and he bought me the first go-kart. And a week after, we were straight ahead into the first race. And since then, was an ongoing race after race every weekend.
That's crazy. So it was a really quick transition. It sounded like that you just went pretty much from no experience into racing really quick.
Yes, I definitely can say that there was one of the cases when you can see that you are linked to a sport. I was talented straight away, and luckily, since the first week I jumped into the go-kart, I showed good performance, and luckily my father followed my dream, and together we grew really quickly. After 1 year, I was already Italian champion. After 3 years, I was already driving for a manufacturing go-kart, winning a European World Championship. So it was a really quick transition, I have to say. So I was one of the lucky ones.
I think, like you touched on, a lot of athletes, especially this day and age, you have to have that raw talent, and obviously in motorsport, that's a big factor. You can have the car behind you. We can see guys, especially nowadays, with guys like Hamilton, Verstappen. Yeah, they've got the car behind them, but essentially, you still need that element of talent to really, push you along. And especially in those younger years, go-karting, it's all about raw talent, essentially, and you clearly had that. And going even into Formula One, I was sort of thinking about this not too long ago. You probably came in during the toughest period of Formula One with the crop of drivers that were around during your time. You look at the guys like Schumacher at the back end of his career, and obviously then his comeback as well. Alonso was in his peak at 2005 and 6 when you first started. Then you sort of saw the coming of age of guys like Lewis Hamilton, Jenson Button, and then you got obviously Sebastian Raikkonen. Yeah, you can't forget Kimi.
I was having a shit.
And then Sebastian Vettel. So you definitely had a really tough group of drivers. And look, that's just to name a few of the world champions. There was so many other guys that never won titles that were so strong. Guys like Mark Webber, Felipe Massa, Barrichello was thereabouts at the time as well. So you definitely had a tough crop of drivers that you were competing against. But in Formula One, it does make a big difference in terms of the vehicle that you're driving. I wanted to ask you, Tonio, as well. You had 80 Formula One starts. You scored 25 points over that period of time. And especially back when you first started, the point system was the old school. What was it? I think back then it was 8.
10 for the win, 10,
yeah, 10
8, 6.
86. Yeah. So, to still get points in that area was a very tough task as well. So you definitely, to firstly just make it to Formula One is huge, but to even score points. But you did something really special, which was you scored points on your debut. Do you remember much of that first race?
For sure, it was amazing because my debut was basically in my home race because I was basically in Imola. It was my debut, and was a period where I was sharing my seat with Christian Klien at Red Bull. Was the first year of Red Bull where the car was obviously at the beginning and nobody knew. I was expecting high performance, but definitely scoring point in Imola, finishing P8. And when I was at the grid, the starting grid, beside me I had Coulthard, and behind me Michael Schumacher. It was a really intense feeling straight away as a first experience. But I have to say that I was really proud of my debut, and I have to say that I'm also really proud of my career. As you say, it was a really tough period, not only because the great amount of name that they were there, but also because it was the toughest period economically for Formula One, because there were a lot of teams that were struggling, and I think I've been always at the right place at the wrong time because I've always have been in team where I had to develop the team. I was at the first, second year of the team, and I was big part of the development. And nothing against basically what happened, but all the team really enjoyed my position in the team. The problem is that after when the team start to have a good car, good result, the political side start to enter the team, and I was never supported politically, and I never had money behind me in terms of budget, let's say sponsor that were supporting me. So I was always losing, let's say, my seat because basically other drivers were coming with big budget beside, and this is unfortunately is part of the game where not only the talent counts.
I think you actually beat me to a lot of questions I'm going to ask you later on as well. But seeing as we're on that topic, you hit the nail on the head where it is unfortunate that Formula One is heavily dominated by the financial backing of drivers, and we see that now. Look, it has calmed down quite a lot, but in your era, there were quite a lot, as they call them now, paid drivers. And it is unfortunate because people with raw talent, unless they were really well known and exposed in terms of media, publicity, whatever else, they just weren't getting opportunities at high, recognized teams, exactly like yourself. And again, I'm going to touch on this later on, but you were actually at teams that developed to become so successful. We said Red Bull. You were part of the inaugural Red Bull team. You, Christian Klien, David Coulthard, and you had such a weird concept there with the three-man team driving where you were going to split seats. You and Christian were going to split seats, and DC basically had the main seat for the season. But yeah, it's just crazy when you look back at, you went to Red Bull, left Red Bull, and then they started developing quite strong. Went to Toro Rosso in 06 and 07. 2008, they were a consistent point scoring team, as well as, Vettel winning a race for him as well. And even with Force India, Force India were just starting to hit their straps in 2010. And then when you left there, they started being quite high. I think they ended up finishing fourth in the constructors at one point, and they became a really high performing team. But we'll go back to just some early career stuff as well, Tony. I've got a few things I wanted to ask you. So you started young in karting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you won the '93 Italian karting championship. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, and then you went on in 1995. You came second in the World Championship. That's it. I'm
Yes,
trying to get all the cobwebs out of your brain now, trying to get all the history back.
I think was 94, but yeah, could be 94, 95. Yes, in this, I think maybe you know more than me.
Nah,
you read lately. You read lately.
yeah. But then the one thing I wanted to really touch on as well from those early years was the 2001 karting championship, which you actually defeated Michael Schumacher. How was that experience racing him back then?
Actually, I have to say that it was one of my great memories because basically I met an amazing champion, an amazing professional driver, and a hero of motorsport. And basically, at the beginning, when we knew that it was going to come to basically race against us, we were all really upset because obviously World of Go-Kart was our, let's say, pinnacle of motorsport, and we wanted to be the best. And we knew that when Michael would have come, all the image was gone away from us, and we were focusing on fighting for the championship. And when he came, I was really, this guy who's going to remove all the interest from media, from everybody, to us and going to him. But I have to say that I always will be thankful to Michael because because of this that he came to race, I became the most known go-kart world championship in history. Because basically all the media wrote that he came to race the go-kart and I won the championship. So it was a big help for me and put me straight in the spotlight. And I will always be thankful to Michael for that.
That's awesome. I was going to say that that's actually spot on there. It really put you on the map, didn't it? Defeating him and winning that championship, having him around and all the hype around him, but then you've come along and actually beat him. It really put you in a high regards and essentially would have opened those doors towards Formula One because if I'm not correct here, but you went from there into Formula 3000, which was equivalent to F2 today. Oh, was that
No, Formula 3. I went basically because in the 2001 I raced go-kart and Formula Renault together. Then I won the karting world championship and I finished second in the German Formula Renault. And I stepped up into Formula 3 for 1 year. And then the year after I went to Formula 3000 for 2 seasons.
How was that feeling in the car? Like the jumping from essentially go-karts, which was only 2 years earlier, going straight to Formula Renault and then Formula 3000. It would have been such a big difference in terms of the way the car responded and, the feeling of it all. How did you feel coping with that?
What was really tough, I have to say, especially the first couple of tests, because the driving style is totally different when you approach a single seater with aerodynamics. But at the end of the day, I grew up for adrenaline, and what brought me always to the next level was the need for speed. Going faster, pushing myself more and more to the limit, and adding some techniques. What I was doing, but. I think not many people know, but I was maybe the shortest time in between go-kart and driving the first Formula One ever, because I was winning the karting world championship in 2001 in November 2001, and basically I drove the first time Formula One was a Williams BMW together with Juan Pablo and Ralph in Valencia in October 2002. So basically, during my Formula 3 season, at the end of the season, I drove for the first time the Williams Formula One. That at the time was the finishing second in the World Championship. It was an amazing car with 1,000 horsepower. It was crazy, and it was the first Formula One experience for me.
That's unbelievable. I did do some research on that. I knew you had that test with Williams. I thought it was maybe 03, but 02 is unbelievable to think that at the end of 2002, again, only a few years prior, you were racing go-karts and you're now testing a Formula One car. And BMW in that era were really strong. Like Williams were a strong team. And, having guys like Juan Pablo and obviously Ralph was, I think, part of the team in that time as well. Did you get to spend much time with them? What were they like with you?
No, they were amazing, especially Juan Pablo was really a natural guy. He was really, as you can see him around, basically. He doesn't care of anything. He's there, he talks to you like if you are a normal guy, one of them. At the time, I was only 22 years old, 21, 22 years old. So it was amazing. And he supported, and whatever I was asking him, he was happy to advise and be supportive. Ralph was a little bit more tight, let's say, was a little bit more introvert, more private. But Juan Pablo was amazing. But at the time, my test was regarding a test driver position. So was something maybe because I was not interfering in their position as a race car driver, but also was only for a position of their test driver. They were really helpful. And the year after, I tested the Sauber, going for a race driver seat in 2003, together with Felipe Massa. And the test went really well, but at the end, Eccleston forced Sauber to sign Villeneuve.
Yeah, I remember that.
The test went really, really well, so I was really, really happy. But actually, was something really negative in that day. That basically at 7:30, before the session started in the morning, before my full test started, Mr. Sauber called me and say, "Listen, unfortunately, we have to tell you that you're gonna do the test, but we cannot sign you, whatever will be the test, because we have to sign Jacques Villeneuve." Basically, they've been pushed from Mr. Eccleston to have an ex Formula One World Championship, ex Formula One champion in the field, and that's why I had to wait 1 year longer.
Because I was going to say, do you think a lot of that was also financial, or do you think it was because of Villeneuve's name, because he had won that world title in '97?
No, no. At the time was pretty clear. They basically, because at the time was a kind of not a boring period, because the Formula One is never boring, but a more calm period of Formula One, where everybody
During the
was
Michael
complaining that
Schumacher
Michael Schumacher
dominance.
was
Yeah.
exactly was winning everything, and basically they needed to have another ex-world champion in the field to try to put some vibe in the basically action of the championship, and that's why Mr. Eccleston forced Mr. Sauber to sign Jacques, because at the time he was the only one that won another Formula One World Championship in the market. So
Did you because Sauber were linked with Ferrari back then, they were really like the feeding ground. That's where Massa went through and obviously went to Ferrari. Were you linked with Ferrari at that time? Were there ever talks with Ferrari to potentially go and do stuff with them, or not really?
no, I was never linked, but I went to talk to them basically after my season of Formula 3000 in 2004. Basically, I dominated the championship in Formula 3000 when I won the title with the Arden Motorsport, the team where Christian Horner was team principal. And at the end of the season, I went to talk in Maranello with Mr. Todd and Ross Brown, that they were there basically meeting me, and they offered me clearly, because they were really interested to me for a position in Ferrari, but they said that they could never offer a race car, a race driver seat. They could never, how to say, basically be sure that I would have drive in a race. But they offered me like a long-term test driver seat in Ferrari, and at the time I was young and wild, winning, so I didn't accept. Maybe I did wrong, because Ferrari is always Ferrari. But at the time I wanted to race, and I stepped out of the basically offer.
It's so interesting again to hear that, because look, at the time, and you did just touch on it, but you dominated, I believe, the 2004 F3000 season. You had, from what I believe, it was 7 wins, 9 poles, 9 podiums. You won the championship, I believe, with a race to spare as well. And coming into that period of time, it just really put you on the map. Obviously, even from the Michael Schumacher beating him in the karting, but at that stage, you'd had a few tests in Formula One. Your name was out there in terms of the Formula One grid. How then did you get linked to Red Bull? So how did that go from, because I believe, was Arden linked with Red Bull at the time? It was, wasn't it?
Basically, thanks to my go-kart world championship win, in that race there was Dr. Marco coming to watch. It was in 2001, and basically prior to that race we start communication with Dr. Marco for a position in the Red Bull Junior program, because they were really happy about my job in go-kart, and they wanted to, at the time was really the beginning of the junior program of Red Bull. There was only Klien, there was an ex-driver, Patrick Friesacher, that is still linked to Red Bull. And then after I saw, he raced for Minardi, exactly, correct.
Yeah,
1 year, I think he did with Minardi. And then basically they offered me a position. In fact, when I won the karting world championship, I already had the logo, because basically they were my partner, my sponsors, and they supported me in my career in the youngest in the early stage, basically in Formula Renault, Formula 3, Formula 3000, by supporting my management for the growing up, let's say. So that's why I was already linked to Red Bull. I was one of the Red Bull athletes at that stage.
So now we've sort of gone through that 2004, you dominated F3000. When were you made aware that you were going to be actually racing for Red Bull in the 2005 season? Because Red Bull hadn't been in Formula One yet. They were obviously partners with Sauber at the time, I think, as well. But Red Bull bought Jaguar. So Red Bull weren't a team in 2004. When did you know that you were essentially going to be racing for the main team in 2005?
Basically, after the let's say Sauber screwed all the program we were gonna have, me basically being in the 2004 lineup, but basically Mr. Mateschitz was a really good supporter and good friend of mine, and he told me that he was gonna do anything trying to support me for my step up into Formula One. And when basically they decided to create buy the team of Jaguar, basically they told me that I was gonna race. But they didn't realize after that they had a little bit of a mixed situation, because they couldn't put only me and Clean in the team because we were both really young. They needed to have an experienced driver as to be like the front man of the team, basically for the development, for the front face, obviously. And Coulthard was the chosen one, and that's why he was the first driver. And at the beginning, Mr. Mateschitz said that me and Clean, we would have shared the seat, because we both had to be at the same, let's say the same position. But then after the first couple of swaps, we realized that was not going to be good for either for me or for him. So I decided to step out of that position, because Krian was already since 2 years in Formula One with Jagger. And basically Mr. Mateschitz told me, okay, don't worry, anyway, next year I'm gonna take another team, because I want to do a full Italian crew. Basically, I'm gonna buy Minardi and build a Toro Rosso team with a full Italian brand that's gonna be based in Faenza, and you're gonna be the number one driver. So I was super excited about the project, and everything looked amazing at that stage. After was only a shame that basically they invested 1/5 of the budget in Toro Rosso comparing to Red Bull, but at the time I was not aware of it.
I remember when when Toro Rosso came on board. If I remember correctly, because Toro Rosso were Minardi originally, Red Bull was Jaguar. But I remember when that all came on board. But I just want to go back to the Red Bull day, DC and Christian Clean. David Coulthard was coming towards the back end of his career. How was he in regards to helping? Did he seem like he was willing to help, or was he really still trying to kind of assert himself in Formula One and sort of move to other things?
Of course, he was. He was an amazing teammate. I enjoyed a lot. For me, it's like a bigger brother, David. And but obviously, he's from Scotland. They are special in that. I mean, they are really good in the way how they talk. He can be really political, and he know how to, let's say, position himself in the mind of people. Either he's a great, amazing driver. He did an amazing career, and I really like him a lot. And as I said, he's like one of my bigger brother in Formula One. But obviously, he tells you anything you ask, because we were a pretty good friend, and we were sharing information, and he was telling everything, because he didn't care about. But he knew every time where he had to stop, because he knew how to be in a way political where it needed to be political. Something that was always missing, and was one of the reasons why I went out of Formula One.
Well, with that being said as well, he would have there would have been an element of him, I reckon, feeling threatened, because you had such a high pedigree coming into Formula One. You'd won these championships, your name was out there. So there would have been an element of, you and Christian, he probably would have felt like he needed to keep his spot, especially at that stage, because he was towards the back end of his career. But it still would have been an amazing experience, which leads me to that debut race in Imola in 2005. Like we said at the start of the conversation, but you are the only man in history to overtake Michael Schumacher twice in their first ever opening lap of Formula One. So you've got Michael on a couple of things already now, but like you touched on, just go into how that first race weekend actually felt for you. How are you feeling? How did you prepare for it? I want to know all about it.
Obviously, you feel really nervous for when it's becoming the time of your first Formula One race. But the fact that I was in Imola, in a circuit that I used to love, and you are in front of your own crowd, I think that motivates you a lot. It gives you a really big boost. It was not an easy weekend, because obviously you are on the grid. The car was not the greatest in the field, and you are starting basically with your teammate that at the end of the day, even if he's a great friend, when you are on the closing the visor, he's your first competitor. And then I had Michael Schumacher behind me that made a mistake in qualify. So it was a crazy field around me. And when it became green at the start, you switch off basically all the outside thinking and you only focus on drive. And the first lap was incredible. As you said, we passed with Michael a couple of times at the Tosa, Acqua Minerali, at the Piratella, and the Variante Alta. It was an amazing feeling, but wasn't straight away felt that Michael was a really professional racer, because even in the fight, it was really fair. And at the time, he could have think that, I was the crazy wild guy because it was my first Formula One race and he had to be careful of me. But we had a really amazing battle. And I have to say, Michael is an amazing character because he used to be one of my best friends in Formula One. And he used to respect me a lot because since the karting Formula One race, the karting World Championship we raced together, he had great respect for me because he used to love go-kart and he kept driving as much as he could.
That's beautiful, man. I want to also go on then. So from that, I believe Christian raced those first few races in 2005, and then you came in for, I think, maybe the next 3. You might have done 3 or 4 races at that time as well.
4.
Yeah. And then you've obviously then decided, so that was your choice to pull out of that seat? Or was that the team's choice?
No, basically after I think was Nürburgring, that was my 4th race. We had to swap again into the basically Christian being back in the race seat. And while him racing the next couple of races, we decided for both was not good this strategy of changing seat every 4 races, because you don't get the basically the consistency. You don't get the team beside you because you always change driver. So I decided to step out. At the time, there used to be the 3rd car, basically still driving on Friday. So I accepted to be the 3rd driver that was testing on Friday and basically getting ready for the 2006 championship. But it was basically my idea with the team, because I thought even though I had to miss races, but it was the best solution for the team, because compared to a lot of other teams, I think that I'm many times too nice, too fair, and I always go for the good of the team more than my own good.
So then you go to 2006. You finally got that full-time seat with Toro Rosso at the time. Now, was that Scott Speed, your teammate back then?
Correct.
Now, he came in because I remember Formula One had a shocking situation at the 2005 US Grand Prix. And I know they were really trying to push getting a US driver on the grid. What were your experiences with Scott? How did you find him?
Scott used to be amazing because there used to be really a cowboy into Formula One car,
Yeah.
and it was really good fun. And also with him, I became really good friend, and we really had no secrets between us. We were always pushing each other to the limit. And Scott, I have to say that when he was in a good day, he was a really tough cookie to beat because he was really, really fast. Only his, let's say, weakness was that he was quite a bit up and down in race weekends, more down than up. But as I said, when he was in a good day, he was really, really fast.
It's funny that you said he was a cowboy, because at the time, let's be honest, you had the piercings, you had the little mullet going on as well, mate. You were the party boy of Formula One when you first came in. I remember the drivers' lineup back then as well, and there was all this hype of, they wanted that image at Red Bull originally as well. If you remember, Red Bull wanted that image of we're a fun, exciting team, not really typical looking Formula One, and you came in with that image, the piercings and the hair, and I just remember the hype around it as well. Do you think that was also a negative towards you at that time? Do you feel that there was some negative publicity?
Yeah, definitely didn't help, but I was only myself. I was trying to be myself. Red Bull always not pushed me, but he was telling me that they were really happy about my mentality, because they always want to the real comes out. So in a way, was really they were really pushing me for that, and I was into my character, let's say my personality. I was only myself, and I felt there was nothing wrong. But obviously, at the time when I went to speak to McLaren or other big team that they had like a square mentality. At the time, they had like Hakkinen, Coulter, Raikkonen. So basically, they had more square than precise, like bankers, let's say, in terms of image of dressing or face. So it was not gonna work, let's say, with my image. So it was keep giving myself some trouble, but at the time I was trying only to be myself. And at the end of the day, it was just the wrong period, because if you look after how they go to the track, if you look at Lewis, maybe he was more clever than me, because he only did it after he won the world championship. Because so until they win the world championship, most of them, they are all really square. The day after, they start, piercing earring, tattoos, dressing naked in the track, and nobody cares. They become funny. If they do it before the world championship, no, they're crazy. This guy's too wild. So I find it a lot of, how do you say, in correlation between reality and what it should be. But unfortunately, that's how it is.
Well, you definitely won a lot of fans. Like, that's when I started. Obviously, I was drawn towards you at a young age. I'm 30 now, but I've been watching Formula One since I was a little kid. And I remember you coming on the scene. And again, the drivers, especially back in that time, there were no podcasts. Very rarely will drivers have interviews at all. So you wouldn't know about their personal lives. And they were all so stereotypical and very vanilla. And to have someone like you come in with this personality and be out there and just be yourself, you won a lot of fans for sure at that period of time. And again, mate, I'm still a fan. I know there's 1,000 other fans out there that loved what you did and how you presented yourself. So just keep being you. And I think that's probably big advice to everyone now. Just be yourself. You know what I mean? Be yourself. But we'll keep going. You were the first ever point scorer for Toro Rosso as well, which is, again, no one can ever take that away from you. You were the first ever point scorer for Toro Rosso. So that was, I believe, at the USA Grand Prix. You came eighth in that race. Do you remember much about that?
Yeah, I remember. We finished P8 and was like a miracle at the time, because we were racing with the V8, with the V10, with the Cosworth V10.
Yeah.
And it was a really great present to the team. Indianapolis was not the kind of circuit that was suiting our engine style, because we were the only team with the V10 with less power, to be related basically to the new V8 of all the other teams. But basically, it was a really tough race. And when we scored the first point, it was a big joy, because if you remember, the first point for a small team, it was a big support economically. So the team went really wide.
100%, especially for a team like Toro Rosso back then, who were using Minardi's old chassis even as well. And they were using they were the last team to use the V10 engine. Toro Rosso were the final team to use that V10 engine. But then we go to 2007. You're still full-time with Toro Rosso, but then you get a teammate of the young Sebastian Vettel who joined you towards the back end of that season. And you guys both together had a really strong race, I believe, at the Chinese Grand Prix. Was it 6th that you finished? I think it was 6th or 7th.
Yes, I finished 6th, and Sebastian finished 4th. Was another one of these occasions in my career where I lost the podium, basically, because or I lost a big result. Like it happened many times, for unlucky or for failure of the car. But in that situation, I went really, really fast in China. In qualify, I did P11 in qualify, and Sebastian was P19. At the time, you used to qualify with the fuel of we basically, he started with for one-stop strategy, because he was starting last. I started obviously to be with the field with a two-stop strategy. In the middle of the race, either it rained or we changed from wet to dry. And basically, I had to do 3 pit stops instead of him doing only 1 pit stop. And obviously, even though he had a much slower pace as me, he finished 4th, and I finished 6th. But obviously, it was a big noise for him that it was the first few races he made. Nothing to say against Vettel, because he's an amazing champion, and he showed in the future after. But for example, with me, was never a problem of pace, because Sebastian was obviously a good driver, but he was not super fast on the single lap. But he was amazing to bring the team and to develop the team towards him, and that made him a world champion, an amazing world champion. But in that time, I was really unlucky in many occasions to score good podiums or even more for pure luck.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I remember those races. I remember, especially those back end of 2007. You were qualifying quite strong as well for a lot of those races. But a lot of people seem to forget as well that going to 2008, Sebastian Bourdais was coming into Formula One, and he was the one that there was all the hype about. It wasn't Vettel. Bourdais was the one that was sort of touted to be the next Red Bull driver, but Vettel ended up having some really strong performances in 2008, which essentially got him the Red Bull seat for the following years. But yeah, Bourdais was the one that there was all the fuss about, and essentially that's who ended up taking your spot in 2008. Is that right?
At the end of 2007, basically, Gerhard Berger fired me from the position. But it's a long story. It was pretty unfair because I never thought I had an option for the year after, but I never thought I would have lost the seat. But because basically, Mr. Matisch, the 50% of the team decided to change Vettel with Scott Speed, basically upside down, the seat of Scott Speed with Vettel. Basically, Berger chose my side, and Berger was managing Bourdais together with Nicolas Todd, the son of Jean Todt. They were managing him, and basically they create a big history to make me fire, and that's how it went. If not, I never thought I would have been fired from Toro Rosso, especially that year, that it was a pretty good season.
Again, like it was such a shame when you got out because then you ended up going to Force India, which was a good opportunity for you at that time. Force India started in 2008, and you were able to sort of stick with them as a test driver in 08. Is that right?
Yeah, basically, yes, correct. Because I signed straight away. I was really pissed off for what happened with the Red Bull, and even though they offered me a test driver seat because of these, let's say, bad games they played, not Red Bull, but was Berger that played these games. I decided to went out of the Red Bull world, and it was a really big shame because I still feel them they were my family. But then I had a proposal from Force India to sign a contract for 4 years, in which there were 2 years of test driver because they had already driver fixed for 2 years, and then for 2010 and 11 being the race driver for India. So that